This is the Double Doink Dynasty League podcast with Boyer, Andy, and your host, Tyler.
It's impossible.
Season's going to end on a double doink.
Welcome back to Double Doink Dynasty podcast, presented by your performance enhancing dads. What's happening, fellas?
Football's back. Happy Hall of Fame game.
Woohoo! Beer's back. Beer
Beer
back in the
left
garage.
us.
I get to drink a beer now.
Your house is different from my house.
Oh, that's fair. All right. So for this episode, we're going to run a quick look at the teams, the depth of the teams, what their competing window looks like, whether they should be buying, selling, holding, and then go from kind of the future outlook of where this team is going to be in a couple of years. All right. So let's start with Matt. We're going to jump in, go team by team. We're going to start at the top division. So we'll start with Matt here. Matt did draft Kenny Pickett and Malik Willis to go with his Ryan Tannehill Tua combo for a quarterback. He's got Saquon and Christian McCaffrey, which he needs to pull off a big year out of them. Other than that, his running backs are hurting. Chris Carson just retired, and he did draft Tyler Algier, so that might be helpful for running back 3. Other than that, he doesn't really have a running back 3. J.D. McKissick. He picked up a couple mediocre wide receivers this year with Romeo Doubs, Alex Pierce, Calvin Austin to go with Deontay Johnson, Adam Thielen, Courtland Sutton. He's already got Elijah Moore, so his wide receiver core is fine. His tight end situation, he's got Travis Kelce, so he's good for the time being.
Yeah. Matt's team's interesting, right? Because like Saquon and McCaffrey this year, a lot of people are high on them. A lot of people are excited. They're healthy. They're looking good in camp, whatever. But while I wouldn't be against in a redraft league throwing a dart on one of these guys and saying, well, Christian McCaffrey's going to get me 25 points a game. So, I can take him in the back of the first and he could be a league winner for me. Or, Saquon's going to bounce back and catch passes and their new offense is going to be great and get him in the late second, early third, wherever he's going. And like, I'm not against either one of those picks, but you don't want both, right? In a redraft, there's a lot of question marks. So you got to have both of those guys hit. Travis Kelce's still good, but he's aging. Like Ty said, Matt's receivers are decent. They're not the best in the league, but that's a serviceable group there. But then you get to his quarterback situation, and Tua, Tannehill, Winston has got to be bottom 3 quarterback situation in the league. He's got Tua. He's got the 2 rookies coming out of the draft that he picked. So quarterback situation is looking up, but not immediately unless Tua takes a major step forward. So I feel like Matt's team needs a lot to go right for it. And he should know by about week 3 or week 4 if he's selling McCaffrey and selling Kelce and going rebuild to start working with, his core of Saquon, Elijah Moore, Tua / one of his rookie quarterbacks and some of that. Matt doesn't have a first round pick next year, so it would be hard for him to make a push with what he's got. He's just going to need a lot of things to fall right this year is how I see it. Boyer, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that if this was my team, I don't even know if I would look to ride out the year. I don't see this as a championship contender, even if everything went right. I mean, Courtland Sutton would have to be a top wide receiver, and Saquon and Christian McCaffrey would not only have to stay healthy, but they'd also have to be top 10 running backs. I don't think I'm just not seeing it for him this year. If I were him, you hold until the middle of the year when a contender has a need and you can take advantage of that need. But if I'm Matt, I'm not looking and thinking that I'm contending this year. I'm looking for my first opportunity to start dropping some of these guys. Travis Kelce is what, 32, 33, and he's got Dawson Knox behind him, so he might be the first candidate just because tight end is scarce. But I could see him moving on from the majority of his team throughout the year and stacking up picks as we go. It's not like he added a bunch of rookies that I feel really confident that will make immediate impacts. In fact, guys like Pickett or Willis are probably a few years out, if at all. Tyler Algier could make an immediate impact this year. But aside from that, I'm not really seeing a whole lot. And I mean, he's missing his first round pick, but he has pretty much every other pick otherwise. So there's like enough to build up there.
For sure.
So that's what I would be looking to do. I'd be looking at probably the first like maybe 2 or 3 weeks is when I'd start looking at which team could contend if they just needed a tight end, and then try and get Kelce to him. If he holds on to Kelce throughout this entire year, it's very possible he gets zero value for him just due to age at 33 or whatever. Like anything can happen at that age. And with how hard Travis Kelce plays and how involved he's going to be, I worry about this team because there's a lot of injury risk on it. And I don't think that there's a ton of ceiling or upside.
Yeah, I would agree. I also think that it's going to be a 3 or 4 week and then make your decision. You either got to sell off 24 first plus some to get a big piece, or you're going to have to sell off to open your window up again here in a couple of years.
Yeah, worst case scenario is McCaffrey gets hurt, Kelce looks his age for the first time ever, and these pieces that Matt has that could be draft picks right now no longer hold that much value for him, and he's sat holding nothing, which would be disastrous for his team. But as it stands, if he's got to sell McCaffrey, Thielen, Kelce, and look to the future, he's got the pieces to kick that rebuild off.
And you actually hit the nail on the head there, Andy, is that all of these pieces could do just fine, but Thielen, McCaffrey, Barkley, and Kelce, who could all get, good draft capital, if he holds on to him for even just a couple weeks too long this season, if he tries to go week 6 or 7 and it starts hitting the fan with these guys, he could end up getting absolutely nothing for him. So it's going to be interesting to decide how he decides to handle it. If he goes 2 or 3 weeks and then is like, we'll see if I make playoffs. That's a huge gamble, because if he doesn't make playoffs and then, half of these guys Adam Thielen is, almost considered out of the league by the fantasy community. Although I still think he's got life left in his 34-year-old leg somewhere.
He's still a red zone target.
Right. It's just, these guys are literally just one bad play away, like more so than anybody else, because of their injury history or age. They can't come back from it. They don't have time to recover from it. They're just that one injury away. And all of them would make me really nervous if I had them all on a redraft team, let alone a dynasty team.
Yeah. All right. So Matt, either make a move right away here to compete if you start winning, or start your rebuild. So let's jump on over to Boyer's team. We'll stick with Justin Herbert for Boyer. He's got Goff and Mills too, which is fine, but he ain't playing unless it's a bye week. Boyer's got Austin Eckler, Najee Harris, a couple other running backs in there. Kareem Hunt could be solid for another year or two. Still drafted Dameon Pierce, and that could be a solid piece for at least a year or two if they decide to ride him here. We'll see. AJ Brown, DK Metcalf, Chris Godwin at wide receiver. He's got Chase Claypool as well. Calvin Ridley on his suspension. Gabe Davis. We'll see what happens with him. Mark Andrews at tight ends. So Boyer's team is definitely in win now mode. Eckler and Najee as RB1 and 2 is going to be fine. Eckler should have another couple years. Najee's still young. Herbert at quarterback's going to have plenty of time left. Andrews should have another handful of years. His wide receivers, I think, especially with kind of where he's at, I think his wide receivers are going to be a make or break here, right? AJ Brown going to the Eagles, assuming he gets that big target role there, assuming Hurts can target him, assuming things go well, should be fine. DK Metcalf just signed that extension. They should force feed him the ball because he's their best option at this point. And then you got Godwin coming back from the injury, Ridley suspended, Claypool, we're not quite sure what's going to happen with him. Who knows what Gabe Davis's role is. So I think Boyer's big. Brown and Metcalf are awesome wideouts, but I don't know that he's got the depth there to really push. But his win now window is definitely open for the next couple of years.
So
Andy, what do you think about this?
I actually disagree with you, Ty. I think wide receiver is one of Boyer's strengths. Having Brown, Metcalf, and Godwin, despite the question marks that you called out, any one of those guys can be a wide receiver one. So if Boyer hits on even two of them, he's sitting pretty. Then having Claypool and Gabe Davis as depth pieces, there's, plenty of teams in our league that those guys would be at least 50% starters, and Boyer's got him at 4 and 5. So I like a lot of what he's got here for wide receiver. My biggest issue on Boyer's team is RB3, which with his receiver situation, he can be starting a receiver at flex, and Eckler and Harris are fantastic. So not a huge deal, but looking after them, probably Damian Pierce, who he drafted rookie. I think Boyer's got a championship roster. I think that with a solid RB2 type player behind Eckler and Harris, just to shore up weekly flex / bye week coverage, that this is a team that's going to be hard to beat in any given week, regardless of buys and injuries. So I think that's the missing piece on this team, but this looks like a championship roster to me.
Yeah, and so real quick before we get to Boyer, he does have a 23 first. He has 2 24 first. So he doesn't have seconds either year. He's got a third, some fourths, whatever, but he still has a first and 23 and 2 first and 24 with this roster.
Yeah, so not saying that Boyer should do this, but Boyer's one that could go out and offer a couple of firsts and Calvin Ridley, Gabe Davis to Matt for Christian McCaffrey and say, hey, let's help each other out here. You and I are going opposite directions. And then who's going to beat Boyer with that roster? So that's how I see it. Boyer, what do you think about your team?
Yeah, I think I'm a championship contender. Obviously that didn't work out last year and it was pretty much the same roster. I think I had the second most points scored, so that felt good, but it didn't happen. So fantasy football is weird like that. I'm happy with where the window is at with this roster too. It's not just the championship contender, at least tag right now. It's the fact that, Austin Eckler will get older. This could be his last year of really supreme usage. But he should still be useful for another year or two. But really, that's probably the oldest player that I would have to immediately look at replacing. And I've got I've got 3 firsts to do it if I feel like I need to, or I can trade those first for another running back or whatever. So not only do I have, kind of a roster top to bottom that, looks good, but they're all pretty much young and I have the draft capital to fill the holes where I need to. So I like where I've put myself in this team. If I can just not mismanage it in the middle of the season, then I should be fine for this year and probably for the next, maybe 2 or 3 even, unless my receivers in the positions that they're at just all of a sudden nosedive, which is possible, but I don't think it's likely with the talent that they have.
Yep.
Yeah,
for sure.
And so let's go back. I wasn't mad about his receivers. I just thought
there are question marks. You're not wrong.
Yeah. And as far as there's no question marks with Eckler and Harris. Those are pretty much a solid top 10 running backs that you're going to get. AJ Brown, DK Metcalf have massive question marks. The talent should be there. They should be fine as far as giving me some sort of value, but are they going to provide the wide receiver one season that I'm going to need to actually get me to playoffs or a championship? And I think that's what Ty was just mentioning. It was like, do these wide receivers have what it takes in the situation that they're in? And we're about to find out if talent really is better than opportunity and who's throwing to them. Because I don't have the wide receivers who have any quarterbacks. I don't think I'd pick any of the starting quarterbacks for these wide receivers, save Brady, but Godwin's hurt for like 6 weeks to start the year. So
Yeah, but to be fair, I mean, looking at the rest of your roster, Herbert's a top 3 quarterback. Andrews is a top 3 tight end. Eckler and Najee are both top 10, depending on who you're listening to, top 5 running backs. Like, you don't need Brown, Metcalf, and Godwin all to be wide receiver ones. They can all be wide receiver 2s or 3s, and you're still a really good team. But add to that the fact that they can all be wide receiver 1s is just insane.
Yeah. And like Boyer said, the youth in the window, it's all there. So
Yep.
Boyer could sit on this and write out these bursts. He could buy. Boyer's in a great position. So his window is clearly now, and we'll see what happens moving forward.
Good work, bud.
So let's jump over to Paul's team. Paul took over Chris. He's had a year to kind of figure out what he wants to do with this. He's got Lamar Jackson at quarterback, followed by some other guys. He's got DeAndre Swift, Cam Akers, James Robinson, AJ Dillon. At running back, picked up Brian Robinson this year in the draft.
That's who we're calling out? Oh, for running back. Sorry.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So then we go to wide receiver, and Paul has Kadarius Toney.
Yeah.
Paul has
This is where he hit the draft.
MVS. And then he hit the draft hard. Got Drake London, got Christian Watson, got Tolbert, Wandale Robinson to pair with Kadarius Toney there, and Khalil Shakir. So he really hit the draft hard at wide receiver, which he absolutely needed to. He's got Dallas Goedert, Tunyon, and Albert O at tight end. Paul is sitting on 3 first-round draft picks in 23, along with 2 seconds. And he's sitting on all of his 24 picks plus a couple extras in later rounds. So he's in a good position pick-wise moving forward. But let's break down his team a little bit and kind of call where his window might be.
yeah, I'd actually like to start on this one if you guys don't mind.
Go ahead.
I have
Have it.
I have strong opinions on this team. I like what Paul has done. Normally, I think when you're looking at a rebuild, which we can all say with certainty that Paul was looking at trying to do, you're usually trying to get as many young wide receivers as you can, hope that a few of them work out, hope that you have a quarterback and a tight end, and then eventually once that all kind of comes together, then you get the running backs. Weirdly enough, Paul has done that with the youth of wide receivers that he's got. I don't know if this window will be this year because of the extreme youth. I love Drake London, Christian Watson. I think he has talent. I don't think that Rodgers is going to make him a star in year 1. He doesn't like rookies, maybe in year 2. Jalen Tolbert, I thought was a great pick. He has a couple young guys on his main roster that are okay, but for the most part, those are going to be his guys. But his running backs are actually halfway decent. As long as James Robinson could come back even part of the way through the year. Deontay Foreman, I personally think that he could end up being really good. Is he backing up McCaffrey, I believe?
Yeah, I think that sounds right. I mean, Chuba's still there too.
Yeah, but Foreman did so well for Henry that he could easily see a lot of action. DeAndre Swift could be the running back 1. A lot of fantasy people, analysts are calling that out. So I'm not saying that he's a championship contender, but he's got some young running backs. If those wide receivers can, come out of the gate quickly, like we've seen some wide receivers do recently, we could very quickly be talking about Paul being a playoff contender as early as next year.
I don't see Paul as a this year team. I don't disagree with the things that you said. I think that Akers and Robinson are still somewhat question marks. Robinson, you're hoping comes back. Akers, you're also hoping comes back. You know that he's playing and healthy, but does he have what he had before? But I mean, the talent is there. Lamar Jackson's great. These rookie wide receivers that he drafted, pair that with Kadarius Toney, who hopefully is going to continue what he was doing when he was on the field last year. And then the running backs are decent. I'm not a huge fan of the tight end situation, but like you said, Paul's got 3 firsts next year. I think this team's going to be terrifying 2 years from now. Once he's got, what Drake London and Christian Watson in year 3, all 3 of his first round picks next year in year 2, plus whatever rookies he gets the year after that. Like, this is a very strong team in the pretty near future. It's just not there yet.
We
Yep,
could
I would-
we could actually
ahead.
see AJ Dillon as his running back too by the end of this year too.
Yeah.
I mean, and I love AJ Dillon. I think he's going to be a good fantasy asset this year. So I don't think that that's a bad thing. I just think that's just more youth at running back that I think most rebuilding teams, when they come into a orphan, just don't have the luxury of having that he does.
Yeah, and I'm totally on board with what you guys have said. I'm with Andy on. I think 2024, this could be a real scary team. So
Good work, Paul. Keep it up.
yeah, go ahead and stuck it up this year, and then find your way towards the top. All right, what do you want to jump in on this guy Ty's team?
I can take it.
Okay.
Ty, your team sucks.
Wait, what? I thought we were just kind of talking. Okay, go on.
All right, I'm going to move to my team now. All right, Ty's got Zach Wilson, who is a MILF banger. Carson Wentz, who wishes he was a MILF banger. He's not even that. And Trey Lance, who finally has a job, so that's cool for him. Antonio Gibson, J.K. Dobbins, and Kenneth Walker. Ty's top 3 running backs. A lot of youth there, but some question marks with playing time, competition, health. T. Higgins, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Christian Kirk. I don't know that any of those guys is the number 1 on their team. Christian Kirk probably is because of the way he got paid. But T. Higgins for sure is behind Jamar Chase, but he is doing a lot regardless. And then Pat Freiermuth and Ty's got a good young team. His quarterbacks, Trey Lance, Zach Wilson are young. Gibson, Dobbins, and Kenneth Walker are young. Higgins, Brown are young. He picked up Pickens and Dotson in the draft. So Ty's got young pieces. I'm less excited about where the current roster is than maybe Paul's team, but I think that some of that is the quarterback situation. But Ty's got 2 first, 2 second next year. So I think Ty's team is in rebuild. I don't see a window for contention this year, but it's not bad.
Yeah, looking at Ty's team, running back is going to be the bugaboo for him as he rebuilds, because the running backs that he drafted, at this point, whether 2 years ago or whatever it was, they looked promising and youthful, looked like they could have been studs for years. And now Antonio Gibson appears to have hit just a brick wall as far as he can go. He's not getting the receiving work we thought he was going to. Brian Robinson was drafted behind him. J.K. Dobbins looked really good, had a bunch of efficiency, but then he got hurt. We don't know how that's going to end up impacting him going forward. Plus, he lost a whole year where he could have been playing. So the running backs that when I looked at Ty's drafts at the startup, I thought the running backs were a strength. And now they're almost looking like his weakness, and his wide receivers, T. Higgins, I mean, he could be a wide receiver one even with Chase there. And then he's just got a ton of youth just sitting out in his wide receiver spot, which is exactly what you're supposed to do. And the good thing is he does have those early picks next year to try and go grab some running backs to add to Kenneth Walker. But man, those running backs and then a quarterback are going to be just so important for him, and see where he's able to open up a window at. I think the 23 draft is going to make or break Ty. If he doesn't draft right, then his window is not for another like 3 or 4 years. If it does break right, then he could be, on top of the league starting in a year or two. So 23 draft, Ty, that's no pressure.
Yeah. No problem. I got it covered. If anybody knows rookies, I look into them often. The only upside that I feel is I do have high hopes for Pickens to come in and get some work. I do have hope that Josh Palmer will be the number 3 out in LA, and that he will start making some moves. But like you guys said, I've got at least another year or two before I'm really pushing. They put a lot of weapons around Zach Wilson, so let's pray that this works out a little bit. Zach Wilson, Trey Lance, somebody's got to come through for me. But I'm banking on Matt and Jeremy's picks for 23. So Matt, if you could do that, like lose the first couple weeks and then sell thing, that'd be great. So, but yeah, I'm pushing the 24-ish window, like I would say Paul is also doing. So, yeah. Boyer being a juggernaut, me and Paul both building up for 24. Our division's going to suck sooner than later. All right, Boyer, jump into Andy for me.
Anytime. You name
I know. I knew that about you.
An open invitation over here, guys.
Andy at quarterback has Brady and Burrow, and is rostering Drew Lock. He's got he's got Joe Mixon, Javonte Williams, Devin Singletary, Madison, Samaje Perine, Ty Williams, Chris Evans, Hawkins, and Boyd. He's got Devontae Adams, Tyreek Hill leading up the wide receivers with DJ Moore. He's got Mike Williams, the surprise breakout from last year. Tyler Boyd, a good solid player despite he's the number 3 target. He's got Mecole Hardman just in case he decides to learn how to play. Darius Slayton, Quintez Cephas, KJ Osborne, De'Ami Brown. At tight end, he's looking at Kyle Pitts, and then Ricky Seals-Jones and Trey McKitty.
Who's excited?
Andy's team has a lot of potential here to go off. I'm a little, this is going to be weird to say. I think Javonte Williams is a good player. Man, this year, like, you're just not catching the break that you needed to with him this year, with Gordon coming back. Because if Melvin Gordon wasn't on that team, this would look like a really scary team. Instead, he's going to be the 1A of a 1A and B. Who knows how that works? It could be the same as last year. Joe Mixon has running back top 5 upside, but that could also just be a heavy passing attack like they were last year. He could be pretty much the same team that he was last year, with the exception that now he has Tyreek Hill, but Mahomes
and Devontae Adams. Thank you.
And Devontae Adams. That's true. But new quarterbacks are throwing to them, so we can't guarantee that they're going to be at the top level that they were. So it's funny because his team looks like if this was last year, it's a championship team. But it's this year where he's got new quarterbacks, and Javonte Williams is still in a timeshare. He doesn't need to be rostering 2 top quarterbacks, but he is anyway for, I can't blame him. So watch out for his bye week, I guess.
Hey, Tom Brady's on the block. If anybody, Matt, needs a quarterback that's trying to, squeeze the last ounce of life out of their team before they're all old.
I think Andy is for sure a championship contender. I don't think he's a super strong one, but I think he'll definitely be there. He's definitely a playoff contender. It's just a matter of who's going to be healthy and playing their best football later in the season. And I think that there's some reason to worry about guys like Tyreek Hill. You know, can the noodle arm get it to him where he needs the ball at? Is Derek Carr going to be a good enough quarterback to get it to Devontae Adams to get him the fantasy volume that we've seen? Those type of things. So there's questions, but they're not really that hard of questions. So I expect Andy to be a championship team this year, and I expect him. I mean, he still has youth throughout. His wide receivers are a little rough, but DJ Moore is still solid. You can get wide receivers in the draft. I like his window for the next couple years at least.
Yeah. So my biggest concern with this team really comes down to depth. I don't know what Singletary is going to look like. I imagine he still gets a heavy workload, but Buffalo's not a run-heavy team. And really outside of that, you're looking at Isaiah Spiller maybe as your running back 3 opposed to Madison or anybody else on that roster. You got Kyron Williams that may or may not get some work depending upon how the injuries look over and with the Rams. But your running back 3 situation is tough. And your wide receiver, your top 3 or 4 wide receivers are all right, but your depth isn't necessarily great there. And you didn't draft any more of those. So I think a lot of it's going to come
How many
down
do you
to
need?
staying
I
healthy.
got Tyler Boyd at wide receiver 5.
I'm not saying that you need a lot. I'm just saying I don't see a lot of potential out of the bottom half of that.
Fair.
Which, like, if you look at some of the other teams, I can see
I
some
don't like the
upside
bottom
for
half
them.
of your wide receivers either.
Well, listen, nope, nobody said my team was good. Boyer just said your team was good.
It's
So
decent.
I'm just throwing some holes out here. All right. So, but yeah, no, I'm with Boyer on Andy's going to at least push to compete this year. And having a couple first rounders, 1 in 23 and 2 in 24. There's definitely a window to buy there as well, having the first rounders. And that's an Andy type move, is definitely buying and putting everything in the starting lineup. So
Yep. So here's my issue with my team. Burrow, Javonte, Pitts is my core, right? And you guys both said my team's good, but not. I mean, it's not Boyer's team. It's not Mattoon's team. We'll see here in a second. It might not even be Burns' team. But I'm looking at Adams and Tyreek Hill in new situations. Neither of them is a spring chicken anymore. So, like, my window for my receivers has to be probably this year or next year. And those things are going to start going downhill fast, if not already on the new teams. But I still need Javonte to fall right this year. I might need Spiller to come into a big role this year. I need Pitts to take a step forward this year. Like, my young pieces that are my core for moving forward need to give me a little bit more than what I've been getting. And I need my receivers to not take that step back on their new teams and or with their age. So, like, it's this very fine balance of needing it all to happen this year and next year before my receivers fall off a cliff. And it's kind of precarious. I don't know how I feel about it. I think it could work. I like my team for this year. But if it doesn't work, but it kind of works, like if I finish 3rd or 4th this year, and then Devontae Adams and Tyreek Hill aren't great next year, and I'm just stuck holding the bag, then I made some moves to make playoffs once, and then I have to rebuild my entire wide receiver core, and don't have much to show for it. That's what I'm worried about.
Yeah, well, and DJ Moore has been such a weird wide receiver since he came into the league.
He needs a
The
quarterback.
dude's well, right. The dude's a talent. He just has nothing to show for it so far.
Yeah. They don't score
So-
touchdowns. I mean, if he's going to get 1,100 yards and 4 touchdowns, that's not enough, right?
So, well, good luck to you.
Thanks.
Push a playoff team, but we'll see what happens.
Let's talk about Quintez Cephas a little bit. No, okay, we can move on.
All right, perfect. Okay, thanks.
Oh, we're getting deep.
All right, so we're gonna jump over to Andrew. Andrew has Dak and Matt Ryan. So 2 solid redraft type quarterbacks for this year still. Dak should be there for a couple more years. Matt Ryan's gonna fall off and he's got nothing after that. So I'm sure that'll be a need coming up for him. He has Jonathan Taylor, Damian Harris, Elijah Mitchell, Melvin Gordon. Depends upon how you feel about Sony Michel and Jeff Wilson. Zach Maw or Trey Sermon and Michael Carter, depending upon if you think they're going to get any work. Michael Carter should still get some work. Then he did draft the rest of the Niners backfield with Tyrion Davis-Price. So he's got that pretty much covered. Drafted Snoop Connor, Abram Smith, Kevin Harris. I don't expect much out of them. With the notes that James Robinson's looking all right to start coming back maybe mid-season. He's got CeeDee Lamb, Stephon Diggs, DeAndre Hopkins, Juju, Brandon Cooks. He does have Marvin Jones, Jarvis Landry. I'm not expecting a whole lot out of those two. But he's got, DeAndre Hopkins suspended is going to hurt him a little bit at that wide receiver 3. But luckily he's got enough running backs to cover that flex that it shouldn't be a big deal off the start. He's got TJ Hawkinson at tight end, followed by Logan Thomas and Adam Troutman, which whatever. So he's still got his 23 and 24 first, pretty much everything but his 23 second. So just kind of looking at his team, he's definitely in a win now window with Hawkinson, with Lamb and Diggs, Jonathan Taylor and Dak. Those guys can all help carry that team. I think his window is this year, maybe the following year, and then he's going to start being in a rebuild situation. His quarterbacks are getting older. I don't know what's going to happen with Damian Harris. Melvin Gordon's going to start falling off. He doesn't really have much outside of Jonathan Taylor and Elijah Mitchell if he can keep the job and stay healthy. Stephon Diggs is slowly getting older. He's not old yet, though, so he's got a handful more years out of him and Lamb. But Hopkins is going to start falling off. Marvin Jones is getting older. Jarvis Landry is getting older. And Hawkinson is still in his prime, so he's got a couple of years out of that. But I think he's got about a 2-year window here, and then I think he's going to have to start this rebuild unless he can make some moves to get younger and stay competitive. So what do you guys think about this team?
I don't see a rebuild on the horizon for Andrew. I think Dak, Taylor, Elijah Mitchell, assuming that doesn't swing another way, and if it does, Andrew's probably got that player too. Plus CeeDee Lamb and Hawkinson are all good for the next several years. Diggs and Hopkins are getting older. Brandon Cooks and Juju are fine as a 4 and 5, especially if Juju could have a resurgence in Kansas City. We'll kind of see how that goes. Bryan Edwards might find something in Atlanta now too. That's where he's at, right?
Yep.
So I mean, I like this team for now, but I also don't see this as one that's approaching a cliff where where Andrew's going to have to, make moves to reset. I think that this is a roster that can have some churn and stay good for the next 5 years. As you go through the rest of Dak's career, CD's prime, Taylor's prime, I think that Andrew's going to have a good team for a while.
Yeah, I think Andrew's team is kind of like that, like good, not great, where he'll probably make playoffs and that'll give him a chance for championships. Jonathan Taylor could drag him there by himself for a season or two, who knows. And he could just kind of keep retooling his team as things come up. He's got his picks. He's got some depth that he can use. I actually think adding Brandon Cooks was a really underrated move for him, and will help him out with that depth piece as the season goes on. The problem is that I think he just, like, despite him having Jonathan Taylor, he then lacks punch with Jonathan Taylor to get him to that next level.
Yeah.
If somehow he could
Elijah
add,
Mitchell's role is, if he's a 75% of the carries type of guy, Andrew's roster is really, really strong, right? If they're a split backfield, then this looks a whole lot different. So a lot of this comes down to him. I mean,
Well,
I don't think any of us expect Damian Harris to get 18 touchdowns again.
yeah, well, I also worry that Elijah Mitchell, he's just not built to be that guy who takes 75% of the carries. Like, that's not what he's built to do. And he showed it last year when he was injured kind of off and on in the back half of the season. So I think is that if Andrew wants to be a championship contender, he's going to have to probably sacrifice some of that ability to stay good for that like 5-year window that Andy was talking about. I think he's probably going to have to try and make some moves. And I think that he's got the depth to make those moves, to add somebody else with some serious punch that can push him over the top. And his roster will still have enough depth that his window could still be open for 2 or 3 years. And then if he drafts well enough, maybe another year or two after that anyway. So if I were him, I would be looking to make a big move to try and win the championship now, and get that, get that belt while these guys are playing well. He's got Jonathan Taylor, who's the number one. That's personally what I would do. But he's got so many options that that who knows what his window is going to be, because it really just depends on what he wants to do as a manager. And you can't say anything that he does at this point is wrong unless he's trading like his whole team for like a scrub or something, which I don't think is going to happen with Andrew playing with in fantasy teams leagues with him before. He's always a tough cookie. So
Yeah, I mean, I'm saying the next 2 years I think is his big window to make that move. Is he going to be good moving forward after that? For sure. But I think there may be some retooling, getting rid of a Diggs at some point, getting rid of, one of the running backs that may be doing well, to grab a couple more picks to kind of help retool, I guess, instead of rebuild, right? So more of a retooling when a couple of these guys in the next couple of years, when I would say they're going to start hitting that wall, he's not going to be holding the bag on him. So kind of retool that into younger, maybe have a down year before coming back. So, but Andrew's got a solid team. So
For sure.
Andy, you want to jump over to Burns for us?
Can do. Burns has Deshaun Watson and Aaron Rodgers at quarterback, playoff Fat Lenny and David Montgomery at running back, Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, Michael Thomas, Darnell Mooney, at receiver, Dalton Schultz, Cole Kmet, tight end. And then in the draft, he picked up Brees Hall, Sky Moore, primarily. So Burns coming off a championship, sold, was it Tyreek? And maybe another piece, I don't remember. Made a move to get some picks, and ended up getting Brees Hall, which is big for him because his running backs needed a breath of fresh air because the Bears O-line's terrible and Fat Lenny is old in running back years. And
Is he got to?
yeah, so he might be good, but I really like Burns' team for now and for later. Rodgers is getting older. He's got Deshaun Watson. So assuming that he serves his some number of games suspension this year and Rodgers is still good without Devontae Adams, maybe not. I don't know. Maybe that's why Burns struggles this year. But I mean, his quarterbacks are good. His running backs, once you add Brees Hall to them are good. And then Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase are top 5, if not top 3 dynasty players right now. So fuck us, right? And then Michael Thomas, Darnell Mooney are killer 3s and 4s behind those two guys. So I really like what Burns has done. I really like the moves that he made to be in a position to get Brees Hall and add him to Jefferson and Chase. I think this is a killer core to a good roster, and Burns should stay competitive going forward.
Go ahead, boy.
If we're looking at championship contention and window, I don't think Burns is in championship contention for this year, because I don't think that Brees Hall is going to end up getting the work that will elevate his running backs up to championship contention. Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase are going to be great, as they always are. He'll have a good quarterback. That's clear. But I'm not sold on his running backs right now. With Brees Hall being a rookie and still having Michael Carter behind him, Zach Wilson, who knows he could bang his mom and Brees Hall could get upset and never play another down. And we don't know, right? So I'm thinking is that this year he almost kind of went into it saying, all right, I want a championship. I'm going to keep my young core. I'm going to go get a bunch of picks. And I'm not saying he's retooling, because he's still going to be competitive. He'll still probably be real close, if not in playoffs. I don't think he wins, but it does make his team really dangerous looking in the following year when this young core is still ridiculous and he's able to add all these picks and all these players to get his running backs back up to speed. Then he could end up, I could see him winning like maybe 2 or 3 in a row after this season if he were to make his plays right. But I think this season will be what we will consider a small dip in his dynasty section of like 3 or 4 championships in a row to start the league, and he's like, I'm bored with this league, I'm just going to give it up.
Yeah, so I don't know that I'm buying the dip here on this team. I think Brees Hall is clearly the guy with the Jets. I think he's going to get 80% of the workload easy. I think the biggest question mark for the team is Leonard Fournette. Can that guy stay healthy and get the workload?
He's going to have to cut some pounds.
He's already down like 15 pounds, man. Leave the guy alone. He'll figure it out.
What, from like 285?
Hey, don't worry about it. If I could get down 15 pounds to 285, I'd be happy too. All right.
Hey, they don't call him Playoff Lenny for nothing. He's just gonna hibernate until then.
That's the problem, though, is that Burns needs him for the regular season.
All right. So anyway, back on track here. But I think Burns is I am fine with Burns' running backs being Brees Hall, Fournette, and Montgomery for this year. He still has his first rounds the next couple of years. He's got Mattoon's second round next year. I really think the biggest thing is going to be Burns' quarterback and tight end moving forward. Can Dalton Schultz still be the guy? Can Cole Kmet take the step forward? What's Rodgers going to do? What's going to happen with Watson? Jimmy G, he can play this year, but I don't know how many more he's got in him that he's going to be the starting quarterback. Kellen Mond, I mean, maybe he takes over in Tampa Bay and is okay. Clearly not till Brady retires, but like maybe he learns something from Brady and takes over. Oh, nope, I lied. He's not even down there, is he?
He's in on the Vikings, yeah.
Sorry.
I think Watson with the contract, once he serves his suspension, should be fine, right?
Yeah. Well, I would think so
there's
too,
always
but
potential. There's always potential for more with a guy like that. I mean, he did. I mean, 24 cases. Like, do we really think that another case is going to show up like 3 years from now when he starts thinking he's on top of the world again? Who knows?
And not for nothing, Rodgers isn't slowing down. He's back-to-back MVP. So, I mean, Roethlisberger hit a cliff. Like, if you look at Roethlisberger's stats in 2019, pre-COVID, he was lighting the world on fire. So That's not to say that it couldn't happen, and Rodgers is definitely at the age where it could happen, but that guy's still good. So
Right. Well,
he doesn't even
I'm
need
just-
Watson.
Breeze was the same way. All of a sudden, like he never had a real strong arm to begin with, but all of a sudden his arm just didn't have it anymore. And he played at a high level because he's a smart quarterback for a couple, 3 more years. So who knows if Rodgers hits that or if he's like Brady, where he's able to keep his health and his strength and is able to keep ripping it for another 700 or 1,800 years.
Yeah, no, I'm not worried about his wide receivers. Lazard could be the number 1 for Rodgers, which would stack that fine. Darnell Mooney's fine. Michael Thomas comes back. Chase and Jefferson are fine. I mean, like what? I'm not picking on that. I think his running backs are fine. I just don't know what long term what this quarterback and tight end situation is going to look like. Which, if we're looking long term, I think those are his 2 biggest question marks at this point. And I would assume Watson comes back fine, but right now
It's been a while since he played.
it has.
That's not nothing.
Right, but right now I would say I'm looking at Burns kind of in the same way I looked at Lesack, right? Like he's in the next couple of years competing hard, and then he may have to retool with the quarterback situation, or if David Montgomery and Fournette fall off in the next year or 2, they're gone. He's got to retool with Brees Hall. I think Burns is in a win now window for the next year or 2, and then it's going to have to do some retooling at running back, retooling at quarterback, and then go from there, assuming Watson, who the heck knows about Watson.
Before we move on, I do want to mention that I don't want to overlook Desmond Ridder. He could very well be the starting quarterback for 8 to 10 games this year. And if he shows out, he's got the draft capital to stay and be the starting quarterback there in Atlanta for a while. So I think that Burns probably I think he saw kind of the things that you're worried about, and he added a little bit of his draft capital to try and go get a guy who had the potential in 2 or 3 years to take over in case Deshaun Watson can't keep it in his pants and Rodgers loses an arm. So, kudos to Burns for seeing that. Obviously he does. And I think we could probably see him drafting a quarterback pretty much every year from here on until he's confident he's got one that he can use consistently going forward.
Right. That or he's going to trade for one, depending upon this Watson situation.
Right.
But yeah, no, I don't disagree. Those were just my 2 big faults. I don't know what Desmond Ridder is going to be, but we'll see. So, all right, boy, take us on to Underhill here.
Undy's got Mahomes, Hurts, and Mac Attack at quarterback.
He paid first round picks for Hurts and Mac Jones. Just want to call that out.
He's making sure that if we switch to a super flex, he's covered. All right. Yep. He's got Josh Jacobs, James Conner, Matt Breida, Ronald Jones, Darrell Williams, Mark Ingram, and Khalil Herbert, and Cordero Patterson and purple. Is that like a question mark? Like we don't.
No,
really
purple is your running back receivers.
Oh, okay. I didn't realize that was a group that we were doing. I figured we were just lumping them into one.
All right, running backs are blue, receivers are yellow. If you went to preschool, blue plus yellow equals bright purple.
That's fair. So he's got Corduroy Patterson, who can play wherever he needs him to play at, I guess, for a season or so. He's got Scary Terry, Jalen Waddle, Hollywood Brown, Randall, the Ageless Wonder Cobb, and Seth Williams. I haven't even heard of that guy. Is that guy actually playing football?
I mean, he's probably like his last guy on the taxi from last year.
He sounds like a stand-up comedian who's struggling to get on. Get a special. He's got Rob Gronkowski at tight end still. Mo Alley-Cox, Jonnu Smith, Tyler Conklin, and looking at his rookies, Jerome Ford, Justin Ross. Just added Mechie, Bo Melton, Trey McBride, and Isaiah Likely. Ty, what are you thinking about Undy's team here?
He's got quarterbacks. He's
That
got
was the thing. That was the thing on Burns' team that you were worried about. I'm thinking maybe these two guys need to like meet up or something. You know, maybe they just start talking.
I'm sure Underhill would take a Darnell Mooney or an Alan Lazard and get rid of a quarterback. I know we can work something out here. Listen, those are Burns' number 4 and 5 type wide receivers. It'll be fine. Andy, don't be looking at me like that. You never know what Underhill will do around here.
No, I don't.
But he's got Jacobs and Connor. Maybe they're okay this year, but I'm not sold on them. Ronald Jones, not sold on. Khalil Herbert might be his core running back piece if he takes over for Montgomery. Terry McLaurin, Jalen Waddle, Hollywood Brown. At least he's got a solid core of wide receiver here. 3 of them, so nobody can get hurt. Justin Ross currently out for the year on IR. John Mechie out for the year with
Leukemia.
cancer.
Guys, cancer's not funny. But in fantasy football, it's kind of funny. This is a dynasty league, and you traded for the guy that's got leukemia.
I can't deal with this guy. But his tight end situation looks pretty awful right now. He did bring in
Trey McBride's his best tight end right now.
Right, but he's behind Ertz still.
Oh, I'm not saying it's a good situation. I'm just saying that's his best tight end.
So I think Underhill's window right now is he does still have a first and a second in 23. He does not have a first in 24, but he does have 3 seconds and 3 thirds in 24. So
Well, that
maybe
sounds
that's
like the Tyler Reed strategy right there.
So at this point, I think Underhill's best bet is to see what he can get midseason here for Jacobs Connor. See what he can get for one of these backup quarterbacks, and try to get some picks out of it and retool this team right away. Sorry, Underhill, I don't think you're competing this year. I think you need to start retooling ASAP, and I think you've got about at least a year, if not 2, depending upon how many picks you can get from some of these guys to really retool. I do like your wide receiver core, and I like your quarterbacks, but that's about all you got going from my end.
Yeah, Undy got caught last year in a weird situation because going into the season, none of us thought that Undy's team was great. I mean, he had Mahomes and he had some pieces, but I mean, looking at it, we were like, maybe, a game or 2 under 500 and see what happens next year type of team. Well, then James Conner did really well, and Gronkowski did really well, and Cordero Patterson did really well. And Undy, did he make playoffs? He almost made playoffs. Yeah, Undy was right there in the last week, right? Which great for him, great for his team. Gronkowski's retired. Nobody, including Cordero Patterson, expects him to have that same role this year. And James Conner isn't going to get 15 touchdowns again. And none of those guys have any value trade-wise. And Undy's given up a couple of picks to add these other young quarterbacks when he's already got Mahomes. And now he's left just holding the bag on these guys who, if his team was a little bit worse last year, he could have traded Connor and he could have gotten something for him. He could have traded Patterson and gotten something for him. He could have traded Gronk and gotten something for him. But his team was too good last year. He was doing too well having these guys that he ends up getting no value out of any of these guys. And now his team is just kind of
Well, he ended up buying Connor off of me.
Did he?
Yeah.
Yeah, which, I mean, if you've got a shot, take your shot. But Undy's got to move one of these quarterbacks, and he's got to add a running back. I mean, Ronald Jones could catch on in Kansas City. I don't think anybody's expecting that. But even then, you're still hoping for James Conner to be better than expected. And you need Terry McLaurin with Carson Wentz to be a thing, and Jalen Waddle now is the wide receiver 2 to do well, and Hollywood on a new team to do well, and your tight end to not be ass, which it is. So I think that this team's kind of in a retooling scenario here. And I'm not sure what that looks like.
I'm going to call it rebuilding, not retooling. He's got to go.
Yeah,
He's
I
got to
mean,
go in.
the quarterback and the receivers are okay, or the quarterbacks are great. The receivers are okay, maybe good, depending on how that shakes out. And the running backs are but the tight end's ass. But to that point, if all it takes is getting Travis Kelce off of Matt, if Ronald Jones is decent and James Conner is decent and Josh Jacobs is good and your receivers are good and you've got Pat Mahomes and Jalen Hurts and Mac Jones, and then you add Kelce, that's a good team. So maybe that's what he does. I don't know. But then you're left holding the bag on Kelce in a year from now, and you're just prolonging your misery to have a team that's maybe going to make playoffs. It's a tough spot to be.
Yep.
Undy's got a meh team. That's what I got to say.
So what's his window? Does he buy to win now? Should he be completely quote unquote retooling or rebuilding? Where do you see this? What this team should be doing? Every other team we've kind of been on the same page. But like, what do you think this team should do?
I think that Undy needs. He doesn't have anything to sell except for the quarterbacks, and I think Undy needs Hurts to go off this year and to sell him to somebody that gets excited about it. But like, you can't sell Jacobs for a ton at this point, right? And Connor Patterson. I mean, you're going to want to hold on to McLaurin and Waddle if you're rebuilding, and then he doesn't have a tight end. So like, it's a tough spot because the guys that you could have sold were guys that you wanted to sell at their peak last year. It's a tough spot.
So the advice is just do whatever you want. Andy doesn't care. Move on. Boyer, go ahead.
Kind of going off of that, that this would be a really tough decision to make. But sometimes you have to make them because I don't think he has a window coming up in the next 5 years with this team.
That's what I'm saying. Like, I don't have advice for this team, right?
And so my advice wouldn't be to rebuild. It would be to tear the team down to the foundation, down to the studs, tear the foundation out of the grounds and build a new home somewhere else, which means that he's not keeping Jalen Waddle hoping that he can be part of the rebuild. He's trading Jalen Waddle, hoping to get a first or even a first and a second or a first or maybe 2 firsts. He's trading Hollywood Brown for a first. He's trading Terry McLaurin for a first. He should consider trading Pat Mahomes for a king's ransom if he can, and just absolutely stack as many first round picks as he possibly can. And then hopefully he can draft well enough with 8 picks every year for the next 2 years that then he's got a team that he can actually do something with. So
as I agree with that, I think Waddle is the one piece you hold. Terry McLaurin is the one you try to sell if he does well.
I mean, my point is that you don't hold anybody. It's not I want to hold Terry or I want to hold Jalen. It's the fact that if you try and hold one of them, then you're not doing the whole tear out the house and go somewhere else and rebuild. He should literally just sell everybody he has, put together just the most shit-tastic team that he can possibly think of, and hope that with a ridiculous amount of first rounds in the next year or two that he can then redraft a team more or less that works. Not to say that this team can't make the playoffs. Andy's right. If you make the right moves, you could probably squeak a playoffs or something like that, but it's only going to hurt him long-term further and further. And it's just going to kick the can down the line. He's in a position now where he's got some guys of value that he can trade, but it's going to take a really tough decision to decide to do that and just completely destroy the team. So I would probably go that route, because the way that this team looks to me, like, I'd keep Mac Jones as my quarterback 1, and I'd hope that I could get at least 3 firsts from Pat Mahomes. That would be a great start, and go from there.
Yeah. All right.
All right. So
Underhill,
real quick,
they are.
I just want to throw this out there. If you're Undy and you have the opportunity to move, let's say, Pat Mahomes and a first to get McCaffrey and Kelsey, you are hurting your team for the long run, right? But does that make your team good enough this year to do it, to feel good about it? That's
No.
not to say you couldn't sell McCaffrey and sell Kelsey in a year from now.
Or even in 6 games when you realize that it's not going in your direction.
Yeah, I'm not saying it's a good idea, but it's there. I mean, Hurts is still a serviceable fantasy quarterback, so losing Mahomes is stomachable in the short term. Long term, I think you still want to have Pat Mahomes on your dynasty team.
Right.
But I mean, we're talking about scenarios for Undy, because we're none of us, or at least I'm not really sure what to do. So I was looking for a way to get out from under a quarterback without giving up too much draft capital to try to fix this team.
I think the only way that works is if we get the McCaffrey from 3 years ago. If that works, if we get McCaffrey from 3 years ago, sure, but it probably gets them into solid playoff contention and a chance at a championship.
Yeah, problem
But
is, it's a tough division,
that's
right?
just a giant, yeah, it's a tough division. It's a giant risk because of the injury history McCaffrey has had. That I think he's better off trying to get 3 firsts for Mahomes, and then just literally trading everybody and redrafting a team over rookie drafts the next 2 years and open up a window starting in year 3 or 4.
Fair enough.
All right. So Underhill, good luck.
All right, before we do the last division, since it's our first one of the year, and I'm already too deep, what are you guys
Yeah.
drinking? Oh, wait, Ty, do it.
Pow!
Yeah,
What you drinking?
I missed it.
Go ahead, Andy. Since you were excited, go for it. You start
All
us off.
I finished a Shiner, and then I cut my finger trying to open
Oof.
my Sam Adams Summer Citrus Wheat Ale. I
Ooh.
had to have Katie run me down a bottle opener because I couldn't figure it out. But this one's almost gone, and then I've got another Shiner in there so that we can be fully loaded by the end of this podcast.
That's fair. Coors is not sponsoring me today.
Uh-oh.
Corn Belters.
Corn Belters Cup Check Pilsner.
You know what I learned the other
Kegs
day?
Around.
The Corn Belters is college kids now.
Yes, it's a college wood bat league.
Had no idea.
I knew that.
I have managed to finish a Samuel Adams
That's
Summer Ale.
Look at us.
Yeah, that's cute.
We're twins.
Little beer twins.
Did Boyer have a beer and not a Gatorade?
Yeah.
Where? You want to talk about your off-season recuperation? We've been on hiatus because you were on the DL. Blame
Yeah,
that.
I had stomach surgery in May, and it went good, and now I can drink beer again.
Woohoo! And we can podcast without Boyer dying.
Yeah,
Right?
he is
So-
officially off the DL.
Not only did I finish that beer, but I now have a 312 in the can. I prefer them in the bottles, but
And
Those are hard to find.
3-2?
hard to find. But yeah, I'm glad to be back. I'm glad to be
Drunk
pretty
again.
much as close to 100% as I can be. We all know that there's something going on, but as close as I can be to 100%. So
I don't think any of us can be 100% in this day and age.
that's fair.
Not in this country.
That makes me feel a little bit better about my life then.
That's right.
All right. Should we move on to Mattoon's roster?
I don't really want to talk about Mattoon's roster. I'm kind of tired of talking about that guy and how good his team's been.
Well, we're gonna talk about it. Who wants it? I
Alright.
can do it if we want me to do it.
Okay, you win.
All right. Josh Allen, Nick Chubb, Alvin Kamara, Aaron Jones, Cooper Kupp, Mike Evans, Michael Pittman, David Njoku, Treylon Burks, key rookie. His first rounders are intact. Honestly, 2023 first rounder from Nolan is also a big win for Mattoon. So I'll say Josh Allen is one of the top 3 dynasty quarterbacks. Good job for having him. Mattoon's team after that is in a very much a win now window. Chubb, Kamara, Aaron Jones are all I mean they're not going away next year, but I think as like first round fantasy running backs, they're all kind of trending out of the first round. I think next year they'll probably be second round, maybe third round picks. So I like them for this year, but after this year, who knows? Cooper Kupp, Mike Evans, also very, very good currently, not young fellas anymore. Michael Pittman, great young stud. And then the tight end situation with Njoku, Hayden Hurst, Noah Gray, Jacob Harris, not great. Treylon Burks, solid rookie receiver coming in. Zamir White, maybe a contributor, but I see Mattoon as very much in a win now window. And problem with win now is if you're winning, you're not selling these guys. So then it gets weird, right? How do you, when do you pull the plug? Do you pull the plug? Do you just take 2 championships and then rebuild with the draft? I don't know, but it's a win now team. What do you guys got?
The benefit is, like you said, he's got Nolan's 23 and 24 first. So he's got probably 2 early-ish firsts. He has Nolan's 24 second, and he's got my 3rd and 4th, which should be early in 23. Not that we're super excited about 3rd and 4th. But most of his picks he's moved from his to early, which is beneficial. But I'm with you on that. Most of his team is older. Who the hell knows about tight end? I think his building pieces, his core is Josh Allen, Treylon Burks, and Michael Pittman. And then outside of that, we'll see what gets drafted from there. So I'm with you on that.
I think it's pretty obvious that his team isn't old; it is aging.
Good way to say it.
His one problem here is Alvin Kamara, is a player that you would expect to have all year, and as an aging player, you want him to play all year. You want him to give him all the points, but without Kamara, his depth is an issue in almost every position. I guess the main 2, like running back, wide receiver positions. Like it looks scary. Chubb, Kamara, Jones, Kupp, Evans, Pittman. After that, I'm not really scared about anybody else that he's got on his team. So if he has, say, a suspension somewhere, or somebody gets injured, or one of these aging players starts to have, like what we've seen from other studs, nagging hamstring injuries, a consistent just tears something because
And Kamara's probably getting suspended, right? We still think that's coming?
Yeah, I think they're saying 6 games, which would be really funny because it would be the same as Watson. But that would be the precedence. Everything that I've read is that the precedence is 6 games for Kamara. I don't know how that'll work with Watson's suspension.
Yeah, 6 feels like a lot when you look at
Watson, right? Which I think is
yeah.
probably why the NFL is appealing that decision, because it kind of torpedoes everything else that they can do. But in the past 6 games for, he had, I think it was, didn't he like punch somebody in the face during the Pro Bowl or something, like during an NFL function? Like that's kind of a super no-no. Like that's not even like, oh, we can just turn our cheek. It's like, no, that happened in front of our faces. So
yeah,
that's something to worry about. But even after that, Darrell Henderson, Ernest Johnson, Kendrick Bourne, Russell Gage, Paris Campbell, KJ Hamler, Peoples-Jones, there's just nobody behind these massive studs. So if he stays healthy and suspension free, sure, he could roll through the league. And I would expect him to, because the team is just stacked as far as starters. But he is lacking depth in a really, really drastic way. And I don't think it's worth it to him to trade those high value draft picks to try and add those pieces of depth. So I think he just has to hope that they stick, and hope that by playoff time his guys are healthy and not suspended, to where he can then win a championship this year. But for me, this is very much a 1-year championship season for him. It's a big season.
Yep, for sure. And like Aaron Jones could be Aaron Rodgers' number one target at this point, looking at that roster. So that could be a big thing. But I mean, AJ Dillon's still there, and maybe that shifts that direction. Nick Chubb has averaged only 13 games played over the last 2 years. So like, I don't think that I'm, in a vacuum, I don't think I'm super concerned about Jones or Chubb. But when Kamara might get suspended for a good third of the season and you don't have a ton of depth behind those guys, like the wheels could fall off fast if something happens,
Yeah, I mean, when I traded him Aaron Jones, so if Aaron Jones wrecks the league, you're welcome, everybody, for giving him to Mattoon. But when I traded him, I was expecting Rodgers to go and Adams to either go or stay, not Adams to go and Rodgers to stay, and mean that he has nobody to throw to. So, I mean, I didn't want to be holding the bag, and it's very possible he ends up holding the bag on Aaron Jones. But because Devontae Adams left, that gives him this year of window of this is it. And I really do think AJ Dillon, and I think the coaching staff wants to run and play AJ Dillon's style.
Yeah.
But there's just no weapons otherwise to go to. So for this year, Aaron Jones could absolutely be a fantastic play, and it makes his team dangerous.
For sure.
Sorry, everybody.
Hey, Ty, sorry about the things we said about your mom.
That's all right.
She's a nice lady.
As long as you didn't Zach Wilson, it will be all right.
No, not lately.
Moving on to Colin Kelly.
Yeah, we probably should.
All right.
Gotta change the subject, Boyer.
Yeah, well, I'm trying. When you make jokes about the host's mom, somebody else has to change the subject. It's not right for Ty to have to do it.
I'm the captain now.
All right. So Colin Kelly's got Russell Wilson, Matt Stafford as his quarterbacks, Derrick Henry, Travis Etienne, Latavius Murray, Phillip Lindsay, Gus Edwards, Ramondre Stevenson at running back. Wide receivers are helmed by Keenan Allen. He's got Jerry Jeudy, Amari Cooper, Antonio Brown, Robert Woods, Sterling Shepard, Emmanuel Sanders, Hunter Renfro, Tutu Atwell, and Simi Fehoko. That's a great name. I'm glad that he was on the roster just so I could say that. And he's got George Kittle, Evan Ingram, Noah Fant, and Hunter Long at tight ends. He added Matt Corral, Tristan Ebner, and Chris Olave in the draft. Tyler, why don't you take it from there? What do you got on Colin Kelly? Why does his team suck?
So Colin has all of his picks except for his second next year, just to get that out of the way.
Thanks. Yeah.
I think Colin Kelly is probably could push for second in this division. Depending upon Keenan Allen, Jerry Jeudy, he's still got Robert Woods, which could be all right. George Kittle is a solid piece. Derrick Henry, Etienne are both solid. I think one of his biggest things is going to be, of course, both of his quarterbacks are fine for this year and the next couple of years. I'm not worried about either of them. But I think one of Colin's biggest things, which we've said multiple times, is going to be this running back 3. And I also think that Chris Olave coming in as his wide receiver maybe 3, maybe 4 is going to be needed. But he's going to need Ramondre Stevenson to step up this year, I think, if he's going to compete. If not, I think it might be time to move Derrick Henry for what you can get if you're not going to compete. Keenan Allen, you may have another year. What you could ride out this year, and if next year doesn't work out, I think that would be your sell window on Keenan Allen. But I think he could make a move to buy into another running back, and make a push for this year, next year. He's still got most of his picks. He's got his first this year, first next year. There's still plenty of buying power. But I think he is in that situation where the first couple of weeks, if something happens, somebody gets injured, you lose 2 or 3 games right out of the gate, Derrick Henry has to be moved. That, or you have to buy somebody real hard, real fast to make that push. So I would say Colin's kind of in that limbo situation right now. And this is a team more or less that I don't know what to do with. Kind of like where Andy was with Underhill. I'm sure that Colin Kelly will buy and try to make a push because that's who he is as a fantasy player. But I think he's in that limbo situation. And he at least has, both of his quarterbacks are able to be sold for a decent price. Henry could be sold. Keenan Allen could be sold for a decent price. He could get quite a bit out of a couple of these older guys. Keep Jerry Jeudy and Chris Olave as your key wide receivers. Keep ETN as your key running back. Hopefully Ramondre Stevenson will step up for him. That's another solid young piece. So I'm kind of in limbo on this situation here. So if you guys want to jump in.
Yeah, I was gonna say, Colin's team here feels like it's headed toward an Undy situation where he's got talent on his roster, but it feels like talent that's not going to be around for very long. And with where Colin's roster is currently, I feel like he could make playoffs, but he's not at the Boyer Mattoon type of level. And it's a situation where if you push for it, then you lose a year of value on all of your aging guys, and then your rebuild's that much harder and that much worse. Or do you sell now? My main issue with Colin's team is I'm trying to look for a young core that's going to carry him in the next 3 years, and it doesn't exist. He's got ETN, who James Robinson sounds like he's progressing well in his recovery and is only 1 year older than ETN, and they both play for the Jaguars. So I don't know how that works out, but I mean, maybe ETN and the Clemson offense that they're implementing there with Trevor Lawrence, maybe that all works out really well for him. But right now, it's kind of a maybe. Maybe he's good, maybe he's not. But I mean, Jeudy might be good. Olave, I mean, there's not a lot of youth anywhere, and the studs that you have are approaching their sell-by date. I mean, I don't think anybody's buying Russell Wilson or Matt Stafford at this point. You either have Mahomes, an Allen, Jackson, a Herbert, or you're a Tyler who's not going to pay for Wilson or Stafford because you're waiting for Trey Lance to come through for you. Like, I don't think anybody's buying a aging mid-tier fantasy quarterback. So
Hold
those
on,
guys
hold on.
don't have value.
You might want to check with Undy first. He might be willing to.
Okay, those guys shouldn't have value. I mean, Derrick Henry, if he gets hurt, because he does have a lot of mileage on him, tanks all of his trade value. And Keenan Allen and Amari Cooper don't have a ton of dynasty trade value to begin with. Those are depth pieces for contenders, and not contenders aren't buying those guys because they're old. So a rebuild's tough, but a championship push would take some selling, and you have to move picks because he doesn't have the youth to move to make it happen. So he's kind of in this limbo of like, well, I'm going to be good this year, but I'm probably not going to be good next year and 2 years from now. So do I sell even though I would be good this year? Do I buy so that I can be better this year and then just suck for a while? Like this feels like where Undy's team ended up last year, where it's pushing for playoffs, but you're either going to make it or you're not, but you're probably not going to get that championship. And then by the time you get to this time next year, you're looking and you're going, oh shit, I have nothing to move. I have nothing of value. And my core youth guys aren't great. So I don't have advice here the same way I didn't have advice for Undy. Colin's team looks okay for this year and not great for the future unless he sells. But I don't know that he wants to sell because it's okay this year. It's weird. It's a tough spot.
Yeah, he has a sliver of a window this year, and if he wants to bet on that, he can. What I will say is that, and we saw it in our other league, Derrick Henry can drag a team with just 8 games played all the way to the playoffs practically. So if you have that kind of player, he should. I mean, I would probably just go all in on it and then just deal with the fallout after this year, knowing that I gave it the best shot that I could. Because if he doesn't, Andy's right. If he doesn't and he doesn't win the championship, what did he gain? He gained nothing. He's still in the same spot as he would be if he did sell a first round pick or two to try and get another running back. So I think the decision is pretty easy as far as go ahead and buy and just go for it, because you're going to have a long haul of rebuilding either way. Hopefully Derrick Henry can stay healthy and get you a championship, or at least stay healthy enough to give you some sort of value in trading next off season. So I would go for it. I think his window is literally just this year, and then we won't see him be a championship contender for another 3 or 4, probably at least. What I will say is that I disagree with Andy saying is that no teams are going to be buying Russell Wilson and Stafford. They're not going to be buying them for the price that you would want to get out of them. My team, for instance, with Herbert, I would love to have Stafford backing that up, but I'm going to give him, a third or maybe a second if I'm in really good shape to do that.
Sure.
But is that really what?
But if your contending team gives him a late second for Wilson or Stafford, like that barely factors into a rebuild.
But that's my point. You said is that no one's going to do it. My point was that yes, they are. It's just whether or not it's actually going to matter.
Right.
Or not.
Fair point. It's not going to matter.
There are going to be contenders who are willing to give up that second to back up their current young quarterback. It's just a matter of whether or not it's going to move the needle enough for Kelly to sell. And I don't think it does, which is why he should be buying immediately.
Yep.
Good luck, Colin.
Let's jump into Colin's team now. All right,
I guess which Colin?
We'll call him Nolan. So Nolan is kind of in a situation. I don't like to say kind of in like my situation because I don't want to compare myself to him. But here we are. So Colin Nolan has. What's that?
How does that make you feel that you're comparing yourself to?
No, don't worry about it. So he's got Justin Fields, Trevor Lawrence. He's got running backs. He's got Clyde Edwards-Helaire. He's got Miles Sanders. He's got Rashad Penny. He got some other guys. He did draft Tyler Beatty this year, which is another third string running back.
Yeah, some football players on his teams pretty much.
Right. So he's got a couple running backs that could start this year and should start this year. He's got Devonta Smith. He's got Rashad Bateman, Brandon Ayuk. And he's got Sammy Watkins, DJ Chark. until you get down to his rookie draft where he did grab Garrett Wilson, David Bell, Kyle Phillips, Bayless Jones, if you think those bottom couple names will do anything for you. But I think Colin Nolan's team is going to be all about those wide receivers taking that step forward. Because he doesn't have any picks, or he's got a second and a couple thirds this year, a second and 24 and a fifth and 24, then all of his picks in 25. So he's got no firsts, a couple seconds, a couple thirds, no fourths, and one fifth. So he's struggling on the pick side of things here too. That's where we're not comparing me to him. But I think his biggest thing is he doesn't have a young core running back, which is fine because in a rebuild, that is really the last thing you want to get, but he's got no picks to get them. He's got a handful of good young wide receivers, or what should be young wide receivers in Devonta Smith, Bateman, Ayuk, and Wilson. The only problem is we saw a little bit of the flash from Brandon Ayuk, but Smith hasn't shown anything from last year. Bateman is supposed to be the number one this year. We'll see what happens. Other than that, he's got Darren Waller at tight end. I mean,
Yeah.
I think at this point he's got to pray that CEH starts semi-hot and move him. I don't know that anybody's buying him though. You got to hope Miles Sanders does something and sell him. You got to hope Rashad Penny starts in Seattle and somebody will buy the hope that he's going to be good. But I think all three of those running backs have to be trade pieces this year to get some first back, to get a couple more seconds, to get something to retool this team, because you're not going to live on Fields and Lawrence and your wide receiver core, because Darren Waller was a miss last year too. So I don't know. I think he's got, so me and Paul, we were saying our window is probably 2024. I think Collins is
After
25,
that.
25 or 26. Just keep looking down the road here.
Yeah, I
Yep.
think it's well documented right now on this podcast that Nolan has flip-flopped his strategy too much, and he's lost too much value in doing so in the last year. With that being said, looking at his team, I like how it's structured for a rebuild if you ignore the draft picks. Wide receivers and youth, quarterbacks and youth, running backs who could play just fine, and Tyler's absolutely right. If they do, you got to get rid of them because they're all in their last legs. Even if they play well, there's no guarantee that the teams will be like, oh, well, he played well last year for us, thanks, but we're going to go draft a rookie because you've sucked for 3 of the last 4 years. So that's kind of what he has to hope for to try and recoup that draft capital. But at this point, he needs to stick to the strategy that he has. And that strategy is Trevor Lawrence and Justin Fields, to me, are probably two of the top most talented quarterbacks that came out of that class and have the best chance to become the next Patrick Mahomes or Josh Allen. He needs to hold on to them. Don't trade them for a second or, whatever craziness. Don't trade them for a running back because that's not going to get you anywhere. Keep both of them and hope that both of them turn into top 5 quarterbacks. So that way you get that value 3 years down the line. So I like where he's at right now compared to where he's been. But he has a lot of work to do to recoup the value to get the draft capital to make it happen in the future. And he really does have to hope, just like Ty said, that his running backs just go on a tear. He can send them to contenders. He can recoup his draft capital and start retooling and really continue his rebuild at this point right away, because he's got to get some first back. Absolutely. That should be priority number 1.
I feel like we've said the word hope a lot. But Nolan's got a lot of talent at quarterback and receiver that's young. That said, a lot of that hasn't shown itself in the fantasy stat column yet. So I think that he's okay there. I think that he will be okay there for the next 3, maybe 8 years, depending on how all these guys do. Um, you know, I think Smith and Bateman is a good duo, but I don't think that that's enough to really build around. And a consistent running back is a big deal in fantasy. Not having first round picks for the next couple of years is really going to hurt in finding that, because you can't trade for it and you can't draft it. So like the guys have said, you're hoping that Penny does well and you can move him for some sort of picks. Maybe you can, maybe Miles Sanders turns things around and is a good fantasy running back. Maybe Kenneth Gainwell becomes the RB1 and is a good fantasy running back, but it all keeps coming back to hope, which is not a strategy. This is not this is one of the bottom teams in the league. And in my eyes, the main reason for that is because of the pick situation over the next 2 years, because it really ties your hand behind your back in what you can do. You can't sit on your hands and just hope that your guys develop, because you're going to fall behind without those draft picks, just by the nature of the dynasty league, because you're not building at the same rate that everybody else is. And you can't buy to get better because you don't have the draft picks. So it's a lot of hope that your youth can get good, hope that your guys that are entering their prime can get good enough to move or decide to keep because you're winning a few games. But it just keeps coming back to hope, which is not great.
Yeah, it's
All
not.
right.
I would say it's not a good position to be in. But when I look at his wide receivers, to me, it's a matter of he hopes his running backs work out, because if they don't, then he's going to be in a super long rebuild, because he's going to have to then end up flipping his wide receivers for those picks, and that's just going to prolong everything. So that's a bummer.
Yep. All right. So let's move on to JerFry. They've got Kyler Murray and Kirk Cousins, then Kyle Trask, which is the guy I wanted to talk about earlier that could replace Tom Brady. But don't worry about it.
Really wanted to talk about that guy.
So they've got a couple good quarterbacks that are going to be all right for the next couple years. Cousins should be all right as a backup. They got Dalvin Cook, Zeke, Mostert, and Edmonds combo. And then they drafted James Cook, Hassan Haskins. So we'll see about that situation. They've got Deebo Samuel, Allen Robinson, Tyler Lockett, Rondale Moore, Jameson Williams when he comes back. Then they've got Zach Ertz and Hunter Henry at tight end, Tyler Higbee as well. They drafted Jelani Woods. Super excited about that. They were. And I'm not sure what their pick situation looks like, because it's not a.
Yeah, I don't know why that's not in here, but I think that they have moved some picks. I don't think that they've been first rounders, if that helps.
I have their first rounder this year.
All right, well then they're fucked.
So on that, I like their quarterback in Kyler Murray. I like their wide receivers and running backs for this year. And Zach Ertz and Hunter Henry can even be good for this year. But kind of like we've talked about, like dynasty wise, outlook situation, I don't know who they're building around. This whole team is getting Kirk Cousins is going to start falling off in the next couple of years, I would imagine. Dalvin Cook's getting older. Zeke's getting older. You got Mostert and Edmonds. I mean, Edmonds is still semi-young, but has never had a starting role that's been worthwhile. And then you got Debo is your young wide receiver you're building around with Rondale Moore and Jamison Williams, I guess. But your tight end situation is not looking great if Jelani Woods doesn't come up in the next couple of years. Your running back situation isn't looking great moving forward because you've got older running backs. So I think their win now window is this year. If Cook and Elliott can take off and continue to be top 5, top 7 running backs, I think they've got a shot this year. But this might be it. So, Boyer, what do you think on this team?
So I think we've kind of talked this to death. And the one thing I kind of want to bring up is we've talked about a couple teams that are championship contenders that have a lot of youth on their team somehow. Where's that end up in the rest of the league, and how does that shake out? And we've seen it with Undy, and that we've seen it with Kelly, and I think we're seeing it here with JerFry too, is that they're kind of in a weird spot dynasty wise. Yes, this year they just like, well, less Undy, but Kelly, they'll be okay. You know, they could push playoffs with the right moves and those type of things, sure. But going forward, it seems like, I'm not going to say there wasn't a plan because they've got Kyler Murray, they've got Debo, but after that, there's really nothing left. And you could easily be holding the bag on Dalvin Cook and Ezekiel Elliott. They might already be holding the bag on Mostert, or Robinson, or Lockett, who now has no quarterback and he's 29 or whatever. So this is another team that's going to, maybe look fine for this year, but unless they make a decision on whether or not they want to try and rebuild or not, I just don't see where the outlook is or what the game plan is going forward. And, I think that there was a learning curve with that in Dynasty, and I think we're seeing it with a couple teams as far as planning 2-3 years ahead. Even Ty, you had a plan where you drafted planning 3 or 4 years ahead. And I think this is just another team that is going to lose their championship window very quickly and potentially not have a lot of draft capital left or players to get that capital to reopen that window sometime soon.
So I agree and I don't agree. I see the argument for this being in the Undy, Colin Kelly category, but I think that JerFry are in a lot better position than those other two teams. Looking at this team, Murray, Cook, Elliott, Debo, Allen Robinson on the Rams, and then, wide receiver 3 is a question mark. Zach Ertz had 100 targets last year and did really well after he got traded. So, this is a team that can win now. And I didn't mention either they're solid rookies. They've got a team that, can potentially be contending. And I say contending probably for a playoff spot more than the title, but a lot can happen. James Cook and Jamison Williams were really strong additions. It's a bummer that Jamison Williams isn't going to be able to contribute for them this year because they'd really like to have some rookie contributions to kind of round out this roster. But as long as everybody stays healthy, they're fine. The other good thing is if Dalvin Cook or Zeke isn't doing it, then this is a really quick rebuild for this team. You've still got Kyler, you've still got Debo, who's only 26, and you've got Cook and Elliott, who I don't think, for me, Cook and Elliott are a little bit more Chubb Kamara Jones category than Derrick Henry and James Conner. Not that those guys are the same, but looking at Kelly and Undy's team, the Derrick Henry, James Conner, those guys seem a lot closer to the edge of that no more fantasy value in a dynasty than Cook and Elliott. So I see JerFry as, if this season's not going well, they have a lot more potential to turn it around and turn that into something in the short term in terms of draft picks a lot better and a lot faster than Undy and Colin Kelly. So I think that they're a little bit better positioned for now. And if it doesn't work out, they're a little bit better positioned to make that switch into rebuild than those other two teams.
Oh, I would agree with that. I'm about their win now window, but I see that the transition could be much easier. So I still think it's got to be this year that they got to make a push. Maybe next year, depending upon how Mattoon's team pans out as well. Because
Lost Boyer.
they could
Bye,
be
Boyer.
they could be the number one team next year in that division
Yeah,
if Mattoon's team falls off.
true.
But
Ertz,
this-
Robinson, and Cook and Elliott are all going to have to hold on for another year, though. And that's asking
Right.
kind of a lot. But
Yeah.
they'll have Jameson Williams and potentially James Cook, depending on what his role is, to backfill a little bit. So, if Zeke falls off, but Dalvin Cook's still good, or vice versa, then you could,
Right.
you could still be okay.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, in that bottom division, Mattoon, Kelly, Nolan, JerFry, like I think that's going to be the weirdest division to watch over the next couple years on who retools how fast and can get back to the top.
Yep.
Because
For sure.
we kind of talked about all of them falling off in the next year or so, next couple of years, where other divisions have rebuilders or like, hey, we're solid for the next 4 or 5 years. Where this one, we're not quite sure what's going to happen with this division. So we'll see. Any last comments from you guys on moving forward?
Yeah, honestly, I'm not sure what you said, Ty, because my computer died. But I wanted to say is that I don't think that JerFry is on the same level as Undy and Kelly, but that they are in a similar situation where they have enough youth they could go that way. They have enough good players they could go championship route.
It's
just
precarious.
Yeah, exactly. It's a tough situation to be in dynasty because you don't know what the right route is, and you have to make a bold move towards kind of either one at some point.
Right. It's like you don't want to just kind of be a little above 500 this year and then have nothing to show for it at the end of the
Right.
day. Like you want to
Yeah.
push for your title now if your team's good this year, or if you're not quite there, and you're not going to make it there with one big move, then you got to sell and pivot to the future. But
Yeah,
it's
being
tough.
being mediocre for like a decade doesn't do you any favors. I know. I've been there.
Yep. So, all right. Well, with that, we appreciate you guys watching. We appreciate you guys liking and subscribing to our content because that's what we do, right? You guys like and subscribe, hit that bell, and you know that this came out right away. But otherwise, we'll hit you guys back closer to the season. See ya.